When transport trains arrived at Camp McCoy, Wisconsin in January 1944, they carried cargo the United States military had not anticipated in large numbers: Japanese prisoners of war. Historical records from the War Department indicate that approximately 120 Japanese soldiers disembarked during the initial intake period, representing some of the first Imperial Japanese Army personnel to reach mainland American POW facilities. The temperature that winter morning registered -12 degrees Fahrenheit, according to base meteorological logs. Prisoners stepped from heated railway cars into conditions foreign to men trained in tropical Pacific climates. Medical officers noted in intake reports that numerous arrivals displayed symptoms of malnutrition, with average body weights measuring 20 to 30 pounds below standard military norms for their height categories. Camp McCoy, established in 1909 as a Wisconsin National Guard training facility, had been designated by the War Department in 1942 to house Axis prisoners. By 1944, the installation held approximately 3,000 POWs, predominantly German, with separate compounds for different nationalities as mandated by Geneva Convention protocols. The Japanese compound occupied the northeastern section of the base, encompassing roughly 40 acres surrounded by double perimeter fencing and observation towers, spaced at 300-foot intervals. Initial processing procedures followed standardized protocols developed by the Provost Marshal General's office. Prisoners underwent delousing treatments using DDT powder, a practice documented in base medical logs as standard procedure for all incoming posts regardless of nationality. Clothing items were inventoried, fumigated, or destroyed depending on condition assessments. Each prisoner received identification documentation including fingerprints, photographs, and basic biographical information collected through interpreters. The presence of International Red Cross observers during intake processes represented implementation of Third Geneva Convention, articles ratified by the United States in 1929. Declassified State Department correspondence indicates that American adherence to these protocols served dual purposes: ensuring humane treatment standards and establishing reciprocal expectations for American POWs held by enemy nations. Medical examinations revealed health conditions reflecting recent Pacific Theater combat experiences. Base hospital records documented cases of tropical diseases including malaria, dengue fever, and dysentery among arriving prisoners. Dental examinations showed widespread evidence of malnutrition-related deterioration. One medical officer's report noted that approximately 60% of examined prisoners exhibited signs of beriberi, a thiamine deficiency common among Japanese forces experiencing supply line disruptions. The architectural layout of prisoner barracks followed War Department construction standards. Each wooden structure measured 30 by 100 feet, equipped with coal-burning stoves for heating, and accommodating 40 prisoners on double-tier bunks. Insulation met minimum specifications for Wisconsin winter conditions, though declassified inspection reports indicate that some structures required supplemental heating capacity during extreme cold periods. Guard assignments reflected military police protocols established for POW operations. Documents from the Camp Commander's office show that guard-to-prisoner ratios averaged 1 armed guard per 20 prisoners during daylight hours, increasing to 1 per 10 during nighttime security rotations. Guards received specific training in Geneva Convention requirements, with emphasis on prohibition of physical punishment and maintenance of neutral professional conduct. Interpreter services proved essential to camp operations. Military intelligence records indicate that Camp McCoy employed 6 Japanese-American interpreters, primarily Nisei personnel from the Military Intelligence Service. These interpreters faced complex psychological dynamics, serving as linguistic bridges between American authorities and enemy combatants, while often having family members confined in domestic internment camps. The psychological state of arriving prisoners reflected Imperial Japanese military indoctrination regarding capture. Declassified interrogation summaries note that many prisoners expressed surprise at survival, having internalized military codes that characterize surrender as ultimate dishonor. The Japanese military's Senjinkan Field Service Code explicitly stated that capture brought shame upon the soldier, his family, and the emperor. This ideological framework created significant cognitive dissonance when confronted with American treatment protocols emphasizing prisoner welfare. Contemporary War Department analyses of Japanese POW psychology identify what military observers termed expectation shock, the profound disorientation resulting from treatment contradicting anticipated brutality. Intelligence officers noted that this psychological vulnerability created opportunities for information gathering, though the effectiveness of such approaches remains debated in historical scholarship. If you appreciate detailed evidence-based World War II history, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment telling us where you're re-watching from. We have viewers from every continent studying these lesser-known aspects of the war. The legal framework governing prisoner treatment at Camp McCoy derived from the Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war, signed July 27, 1929, and ratified by the United States Senate in 1932. This international agreement established specific obligations for signatory nations regarding POW welfare, including provisions for housing, food, medical care, labor conditions, and communication rights. War Department Field Manual 19-40, published in 1943, codified Geneva Convention requirements into operational procedures for American POW facilities. This document, recently declassified and available through the National Archives, specified that prisoners must receive rations qualitatively and quantitatively equivalent to depot troops of the detaining power. For Camp McCoy, this meant Japanese prisoners received the same basic food allocations as American soldiers stationed at the facility. The administrative structure at Camp McCoy reflected this legal framework. Base documentation shows that the camp commander reported directly to the Provost Marshal General's office in Washington, with regular inspections conducted by both military authorities and neutral international observers. Swiss representatives, serving as protecting power for Japanese interests under diplomatic agreements, visited Camp McCoy quarterly throughout 1944 and 1945. Inspection reports filed by Swiss delegates provide detailed accounts of conditions. One report from March 1944, located in International Red Cross archives in Geneva, noted that housing met convention standards, though the delegate recommended additional heating capacity for extreme weather periods. The report documented that prisoners received 3 meals daily, with caloric content meeting or exceeding minimum requirements specified in Geneva protocols. The convention's provisions regarding prisoner labor created both practical and ethical considerations. Article 27 specified that posts could be required to work, excluding officers, but labor must not be directly war-related and must be compensated. Camp McCoy work programs, documented in Provost Marshal records, assigned prisoners to agricultural labor on nearby farms, forestry operations, and base maintenance tasks. Compensation followed convention requirements: 80 cents per day in camp canteen coupons, equivalent to approximately $12 in current purchasing power. Medical care provisions reflected Convention Article 15, which mandated that detaining powers provide prisoners with medical attention equivalent to that available to their own forces. Camp McCoy's base hospital allocated a separate ward for prisoner patients, staffed by military medical personnel and augmented by prisoner medical officers when available. Treatment records indicate no discrimination in care quality based on nationality or combatant status. The Convention's communication rights proved particularly significant for Japanese prisoners. Articles 36 to 39 guaranteed prisoners the right to send and receive correspondence, subject to censorship for security purposes. Camp McCoy established a mail processing system that allowed each prisoner to send 2 letters and 4 postcards monthly. However, practical challenges emerged. The Pacific War's impact on Japanese postal systems meant that delivery success rates remained uncertain, and many prisoners never received responses from family members. Religious provisions under the convention required that prisoners have access to worship facilities and religious materials. Camp McCoy documentation shows that Shinto and Buddhist observances were accommodated within available resources, though the scarcity of appropriate religious materials created limitations. One chaplain's report noted that American military chaplains attempted to facilitate religious practice while acknowledging their limited understanding of Japanese spiritual traditions. Disciplinary procedures followed Convention Article 54, which permitted punishment for rule violations but prohibited corporal punishment, confinement in premises without daylight, or any form of cruelty. Camp McCoy maintained a segregation barracks for disciplinary cases, documented in provost reports as housing prisoners for periods ranging from 3 to 30 days, depending on offense severity. Records indicate disciplinary actions primarily addressed work refusal, escape attempts, or violations of camp regulations. The convention's requirement for prisoner representatives created structured communication channels between prisoners and camp authorities. Japanese prisoners at Camp McCoy elected spokesmen for their compound, who met regularly with American officials to address concerns ranging from food quality to work assignment disputes. Minutes from these meetings, preserved in camp archives, reveal negotiations over issues such as rice availability and religious observance schedules. International oversight mechanisms functioned throughout the war. The International Committee of the Red Cross maintained central prisoner records in Geneva, compiled from reports submitted by detaining powers. The United States submitted regular updates on all POW facilities, including Camp McCoy, documenting prisoner numbers, health status, and treatment conditions. These reports served both humanitarian and diplomatic purposes, providing evidence of American compliance with international law. The Geneva Convention's reciprocity principle carried strategic significance. American military planners recognized that demonstrated adherence to convention standards might encourage similar treatment for American POWs held by enemy powers. However, the effectiveness of this approach varied significantly. While Germany generally observed convention protocols for American and British POWs, Japan's application of international law proved far more inconsistent, creating ongoing diplomatic tensions. The psychological impact of American military rations on Japanese prisoners at Camp McCoy represented an unintended consequence of standardized military logistics. Declassified Quartermaster Corps records reveal that POW feeding at mainland facilities followed established depot troop ration schedules, designated as Garrison Ration A in military documentation. The standard American military ration in 1944 provided approximately 4,000 calories daily, consisting of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats in proportions designed by Army nutritionists. By comparison, Japanese military rations in the Pacific Theater had deteriorated significantly by 1944. Historical research by military historians indicates that Japanese soldiers in island garrisons frequently subsisted on 1,500 calories or less daily, with rice supplies supplemented by whatever local food sources could be foraged. The first meal served to Japanese prisoners at Camp McCoy typically consisted of components standard in American military dining: ground beef formed into patties, fried potatoes, white bread rolls, and beverages including coffee and Coca-Cola. Each element of this meal represented significant contrast with Japanese military food culture and recent prisoner experiences. Ground beef consumption in Imperial Japanese military forces was minimal. Traditional Japanese military rations centered on rice, with protein sources typically consisting of small amounts of fish, occasional pork, and soybeans. The quantity of meat served in a single American meal often exceeded what Japanese soldiers received over multiple days in Pacific combat zones. Nutritional analyses of Japanese military rations, documented in captured supply records, show that protein content averaged 60 to 70 grams daily when supply lines functioned normally. By 1944, disruption of maritime transport reduced this significantly. American military rations, by contrast, provided approximately 120 to 130 grams of protein daily, with beef patties alone contributing 25 to 30 grams per serving. Coca-Cola's presence in POW facilities reflected its status as standard military commissary stock. The Coca-Cola Company's wartime production records show that approximately 5 billion bottles were distributed to military facilities worldwide between 1942 and 1945. The beverage served as both refreshment and morale booster for American forces. Its inclusion in POW rations following logistical standardization rather than deliberate policy decisions. For Japanese prisoners encountering carbonated soft drinks for the first time, the physiological experience proved disorienting. Carbonation levels in Coca-Cola, measured at approximately 4.0 volumes of CO2, produced sensations unfamiliar to individuals raised with non-carbonated beverages. Contemporary medical literature on carbonated beverage consumption notes that initial exposure can trigger gagging reflexes and digestive discomfort in unaccustomed consumers. The sugar content of American rations represented another significant contrast. Coca-Cola contained approximately 39 grams of sugar per 12-ounce serving. Additional sugars appeared in white bread rolls, dessert items, and sweetened beverages. Total daily sugar consumption in American military rations often exceeded 100 grams, compared to Japanese military rations which provided minimal, refined sugar due to wartime shortages affecting civilian and military supplies alike. Caloric density comparisons reveal the magnitude of difference. A single hamburger with accompanying potatoes and bread provided approximately 800 to 900 calories. This represented more than half the daily caloric intake many Japanese soldiers had received in recent months. The psychological impact of such abundance, documented in prisoner interrogation reports, frequently manifested as disbelief, suspicion, or emotional distress. Quartermaster records from Camp McCoy show that POW food costs averaged 55 cents per prisoner daily in 1944, equivalent to approximately $8 in current purchasing power. This exceeded per capita food costs in civilian Japanese populations, where rice rationing and food shortages had reduced average daily caloric intake to approximately 1,800 calories by 1944. The logistics of POW feeding involved significant infrastructure. Camp McCoy's mess facilities operated on schedules accommodating both American personnel and prisoner populations. Kitchen equipment included industrial-scale stoves, ovens, and refrigeration units. Food supplies arrived via military logistics networks, with procurement following standard quartermaster procedures that treated POW rations as routine supply requirements rather than special provisions. Cultural adaptation proved necessary in some areas. Quartermaster documents indicate requests from camp authorities for rice supplies to supplement bread-based rations. The Army approved these requests, and rice became a regular component of meals served to Japanese prisoners, though preparation methods followed American cooking techniques rather than traditional Japanese approaches. The psychological dimensions of food provision extended beyond nutrition. Intelligence assessments from military interrogators noted that unexpected generosity in feeding created cognitive dissonance among prisoners who had been taught to expect brutality from American forces. Some prisoners initially refused food, suspecting poisoning or manipulation. Others consumed meals rapidly, as if anticipating sudden withdrawal of access. The operational routine, Camp McCoy's Japanese POW compound, followed protocols established by the Provost Marshal General's office, balancing security requirements with Geneva Convention obligations. Daily schedules, preserved in base operations logs, demonstrate the systematic nature of prisoner management in American military facilities. Morning routines began at 0600 hours with reveille, followed by roll call conducted by military police personnel with interpreter assistance. Prisoner counts occurred 4 times daily to maintain accurate accountability. Guard rosters show that count procedures typically required 15 to 20 minutes to complete for the Japanese compound S population, which fluctuated between 120 and 180 prisoners throughout 1944 to 1945. Breakfast service occurred at 0630 hours in the compound mess hall. Meals followed standardized military schedules, with prisoners organized into serving shifts to accommodate facility capacity. Typical breakfast menus, documented in quartermaster records, included items such as oatmeal or eggs, toast, coffee, and fruit when available. Caloric content met or exceeded Geneva Convention minimum standards. Work details commenced at 0800 hours, weather permitting. Camp McCoy utilized prisoner labor for various tasks, documented in daily work assignment logs. Agricultural labor predominated, with prisoners transported under guard to surrounding Wisconsin farms, where they assisted with crop harvesting, particularly during autumn months. Forestry operations represented another major labor category, with prisoners engaged in timber cutting to supply the camp's heating fuel requirements. The economic dimensions of POW labor programs extended beyond camp operations. Local farmers contracted with military authorities for prisoner work details, paying the government for labor costs. Prisoners received the mandated 80 cents daily in canteen coupons, while the government retained additional compensation. One Wisconsin Agricultural Extension report from 1944 noted that POW labor helped address wartime agricultural labor shortages, with thousands of prisoners from various nationalities working on farms throughout the upper Midwest. Work details operated under specific security protocols. Armed guards accompanied all work parties, with guard-to-prisoner ratios varying based on location and task. Transportation to work sites utilized military trucks, with prisoners seated in cargo areas under guard supervision. Contemporary photographs from National Archives collections show these arrangements, documenting the visual reality of POW labor operations. Physical labor intensity varied by task assignment. Agricultural work during harvest seasons involved extended periods of manual labor, though records indicate that hours rarely exceeded 8 per day and work ceased during extreme weather. Forestry operations involved physically demanding timber cutting and transport, though safety protocols required adherence to industrial safety standards applicable to similar civilian operations. Midday meals typically occurred at work sites when labor extended beyond morning hours. Camp kitchens prepared packed lunches, documented in supply records as including sandwiches, fruit, and beverages. These field rations followed the same nutritional standards as facility-served meals, maintaining consistency in prisoner feeding regardless of location. Afternoon work continued until approximately 1630 hours, with return transport to camp facilities. Evening roll call occurred at 1800 hours, followed by dinner service. Free time between evening meal and lights out at 2200 hours allowed for various activities within compound restrictions. The camp canteen, operated under quartermaster supervision, opened during designated evening hours. Prisoners could purchase items using earned work coupons, with available merchandise including toiletries, tobacco products, confections, and writing materials. Canteen inventory lists from camp supply records show that popular purchases included cigarettes, candy bars, and soap. Prices reflected subsidized military commissary rates, significantly below civilian retail costs. Recreational activities within the compound received limited documentation, though some records suggest that prisoners organized informal games and social gatherings during free time. Space constraints and security requirements limited organized recreation, though prisoners could engage in activities such as letter writing, handicrafts, or conversation within barracks areas. Educational programs emerged as notable aspects of camp operations. Records indicate that English language instruction was offered on a voluntary basis, with classes conducted by military personnel or qualified civilians under contract with the War Department. Attendance fluctuated, with some prisoners participating regularly while others declined, viewing language acquisition as collaboration with the enemy. Mail processing represented a significant administrative function. Outgoing correspondence underwent censorship review by military intelligence personnel trained in Japanese language analysis. The censorship process served dual purposes: security screening to prevent intelligence transmission and intelligence gathering through analysis of prisoner communications. Processing times varied, with letters typically requiring 1 to 2 weeks before being forwarded to international postal channels. Incoming mail faced even longer delays due to wartime disruption of trans-Pacific postal routes and the chaotic conditions in Japanese territories. Many letters never reached intended recipients, while others arrived months after being sent. This communication breakdown created significant psychological stress for prisoners uncertain about family, welfare, and bombing-affected Japanese cities. Medical services operated on both scheduled and emergency bases. Weekly sick call allowed prisoners to report health concerns to military medical personnel. The base hospital maintained records showing treatment for conditions ranging from minor injuries to chronic illnesses. Dental care, though limited by wartime resource constraints, addressed emergency situations and severe decay cases. Disciplinary procedures, documented in provost marshal reports, addressed rule violations through formal processes. Common infractions included work refusal, possession of contraband items, or violations of security regulations. Punishments typically consisted of confinement to segregation barracks, restriction of canteen privileges, or loss of earned wages. Records indicate that serious disciplinary cases remained relatively infrequent at Camp McCoy's Japanese compound compared to some larger POW facilities. The relationship between American guards and Japanese prisoners at Camp McCoy evolved through daily interactions shaped by military protocols, cultural barriers, and individual human responses to unusual circumstances. Declassified military police reports and guard duty logs provide documentation of these dynamics, revealing patterns that transcended simple captor-captive relationships. Military police assignments to POW. Guard duty followed selection criteria emphasizing discipline and appropriate temperament. Personnel files indicate that Camp McCoy guards received specialized training in Geneva Convention requirements, security protocols, and cultural awareness briefing regarding Japanese military traditions. The training curriculum, outlined in provost marshal documents, emphasized professional conduct and prohibition of fraternization while maintaining necessary security measures. Language barriers created immediate challenges. Few American guards possessed Japanese language skills, and most prisoners had limited or no English comprehension. Communication initially relied heavily on gestures, simple commands, and interpreter mediation. Guard reports note that over time, both groups developed improvised communication systems using repeated words and physical demonstrations to convey basic instructions. The development of pidgin communication appears in multiple guard logs. One Corporal S. report described teaching work detail prisoners English words for tools and tasks: shovel, tree, cut, stop. Prisoners reciprocated by teaching guards Japanese counting words and basic phrases. These exchanges, though limited, represented human attempts to bridge the communication gap inherent in the situation. Tobacco products facilitated informal interactions despite regulations against fraternization. Multiple reports mention guards sharing cigarettes with prisoners during work breaks, a practice technically prohibited but widely practiced across POW facilities. Cigarettes served as de facto currency in prisoner economies and as social lubricants in guard-prisoner relations. Photographic evidence from the National Archives documents some interaction patterns. Images show guards supervising work details at moderate distances, maintaining security while allowing prisoners relative freedom of movement within designated work areas. Other photographs capture moments of apparent casual interaction, though documentation rarely provides context for specific images. Individual guard attitudes varied significantly. Personnel records and incident reports reveal that some guards maintained strict professional distance, viewing prisoners as enemy combatants deserving minimal interaction beyond duty requirements. Others developed more relaxed approaches, particularly during extended work detail assignments, where sustained contact fostered familiarity. Tensions occasionally surfaced in documented incidents. One report from October 1944 describes a confrontation between a guard and prisoner over work pace, resolved through interpreter mediation without physical contact. Another incident involved a civilian farmer working alongside a prisoner detail who expressed hostility toward Japanese prisoners, requiring guard intervention to maintain order. Such incidents remained relatively rare according to available documentation. The psychological complexity of guard roles emerges in declassified correspondence. Some guards had served in Pacific combat zones before reassignment to stateside POW duty. Their experiences with Japanese forces as enemies complicated their interactions with prisoners. Yet documented instances of violence or abuse remain notably absent from Camp McCoy records, suggesting that military discipline and Geneva Convention training effectively constrained potential for mistreatment. Guard rotation schedules limited extended relationships between individual guards and specific prisoners. Duty rosters show that assignments changed regularly, preventing sustained familiarity that might compromise security or discipline. This systematic rotation maintained professional distance while distributing the psychological burden of constant vigilance across multiple personnel. The cultural dimensions of guard-prisoner interaction included moments of mutual curiosity. Several guard reports describe prisoners demonstrating traditional crafts during free time, creating carved wooden objects that occasionally were exchanged with guards as informal gifts. Such exchanges technically violated non-fraternization policies, but occurred frequently enough to suggest command tolerance of minor breaches. Food sharing represented another informal interaction pattern. Guards sometimes received extra rations or items from their own provisions that they shared with prisoners, particularly during outdoor work assignments. One report describes a guard distributing chewing gum to a work detail, creating both amusement at prisoners' unfamiliarity with the product and goodwill through the gesture. Religious and cultural observances occasionally brought guards and prisoners into closer proximity. When prisoners conducted informal Buddhist or Shinto observances within compound spaces, guards maintained respectful distance while fulfilling security oversight responsibilities. Some guards expressed curiosity about unfamiliar spiritual practices, though documentation of such interest remains limited. The human dimension of prolonged contact appears in scattered anecdotal accounts. One guard's letter, preserved in personal papers donated to the Wisconsin Historical Society, describes growing recognition of prisoners as individuals rather than faceless enemies. The guard wrote of learning prisoners' names, observing their personalities, and developing awareness of their humanity despite the adversarial context of their interaction. The psychological landscape within Camp McCoy's Japanese prisoner compound reflected ideological divisions that mirrored larger tensions in Japanese military culture regarding surrender, honor, and adaptation to captivity. Intelligence reports compiled by military interrogators provide insight into these internal dynamics, revealing communities under significant psychological strain. The Senjin-kun Field Service Code, promulgated in 1941 by War Minister Hideki Tojo, explicitly prohibited surrender and characterized capture as ultimate disgrace. This ideology created profound shame among prisoners who had violated fundamental military values. Intelligence assessments noted that many prisoners initially identified as having been captured while unconscious or unable to resist, linguistic constructions that attempted to preserve honor by denying active surrender. Within the compound, ideological hardliners maintained pressure on fellow prisoners to resist American authority and preserve loyalty to the emperor. Intelligence reports identify the existence of informal leadership structures parallel to the official prisoner representatives elected under Geneva Convention procedures. These shadow leaders, often senior NCOs or officers, enforced adherence to military codes through social pressure and intimidation. Documented tensions emerged over practical adaptation decisions. Prisoners who attended English classes, accepted work assignments willingly, or displayed positive attitudes toward American authorities faced accusations of collaboration from hardline factions. Several intelligence reports note instances where prisoners who learned English faced ostracism from peer groups, accused of betraying Japanese identity through linguistic accommodation. The arrival of letters from Japan intensified internal conflicts. Correspondence describing civilian suffering under American bombing campaigns created guilt among prisoners living in relative comfort. Intelligence officers noted increased disciplinary problems following mail deliveries, as prisoners struggled with contradictions between their treatment and their families' deprivation. Food consumption itself became ideologically charged. Some prisoners argued that accepting American rations represented moral weakness, advocating for minimal consumption as demonstration of continued resistance. Others countered that survival served national interests by preserving manpower for potential future service. These debates, documented in intelligence reports based on informant accounts, revealed deep philosophical divisions about the meaning of captivity and resistance. Religious practice provided another axis of division. Traditional Shinto beliefs emphasizing emperor worship remained strong among some prisoners, while others adopted more pragmatic or secular perspectives, shaped by combat trauma and disillusionment. Intelligence reports noted that informal Shinto observances occurred within compound spaces, but participation varied significantly, suggesting fractured religious community. The question of repatriation created additional tensions. As the Pacific War's trajectory became increasingly unfavorable to Japan through 1944 and 1945, some prisoners privately acknowledged likely defeat, while others maintained absolute faith in ultimate Japanese victory. Intelligence officers exploited these divisions, identifying prisoners willing to provide information in exchange for favorable treatment or post-war considerations. Generational and regional differences compounded ideological splits. Younger conscripts often demonstrated greater flexibility in adapting to captivity than career soldiers or older reservists, more deeply indoctrinated in traditional military values. Prisoners from urban backgrounds sometimes adjusted more easily than those from rural areas where traditional values remained stronger. These demographic divisions, analyzed in intelligence assessments, provided insights into broader Japanese society's fault lines. Mental health challenges emerged across ideological spectrums. Depression, anxiety, and adjustment disorders affected prisoners, regardless of political orientation. The compound's isolation, combined with uncertainty about family welfare and national fate, created psychological burdens that manifested in various ways. Some prisoners withdrew into silence, others became volatile or aggressive, and still others developed obsessive behaviors as coping mechanisms. The role of prisoner medical officers proved complex. Japanese military medical personnel among the prisoners faced dual obligations, treating their countrymen's health needs while navigating American authority structures. Some medical officers cooperated fully with American medical staff, facilitating care for prisoners. Others maintained distance, viewing excessive cooperation as compromising professional honor. Suicidal ideation appeared in intelligence reports as ongoing concern. The shame associated with surrender, combined with separation from homeland and uncertainty about future, created risk factors for self-harm. American authorities implemented monitoring protocols, though documentation suggests limited success in identifying at-risk individuals within a culturally foreign population where emotional expression followed different norms than American expectations. Education and literacy levels influenced adaptation patterns. Prisoners with higher education often possessed greater awareness of international affairs and Geneva Convention principles, facilitating understanding of their legal status and rights. Less educated prisoners, particularly conscripts from rural areas, demonstrated greater confusion about captivity circumstances and American intentions. The announcement of Japanese surrender on August 15, 1945, transformed the status of prisoners at Camp McCoy from indefinite captives to personnel awaiting repatriation. Declassified War Department communications document the massive administrative undertaking required to process and return approximately 5,400 Japanese POWs held in American facilities by war's end. Initial reactions among prisoners at Camp McCoy varied according to intelligence reports compiled during the immediate post-surrender period. Some prisoners refused to believe surrender announcements, dismissing them as American propaganda. Others accepted the news with resignation or relief. A minority celebrated privately, viewing surrender as ending a war they recognized as unwinnable. Camp authorities implemented enhanced security measures following surrender announcement, anticipating potential unrest. Military police strength increased temporarily, and camp commanders received instructions from the Provost Marshal General's office regarding procedures for managing POW populations during the transition period. Documented incidents of violence or resistance remained minimal at Camp McCoy, though other facilities reported isolated disturbances. The repatriation process followed protocols established by the State Department in coordination with military authorities and international organizations. Initial planning documents from summer 1945 projected that POW return would occur in waves over several months, constrained by available shipping capacity and logistical challenges in receiving repatriates at Japanese ports. Medical screening preceded repatriation, with all prisoners undergoing comprehensive health examinations. Base hospital records show systematic assessment for communicable diseases, malnutrition, and conditions requiring treatment before trans-Pacific transport. Prisoners received vaccinations against diseases endemic to their regions of return, following public health protocols designed to prevent epidemic spread. Documentation procedures consumed significant administrative resources. Each prisoner required complete personnel files, medical records, and certification of treatment compliance with Geneva Convention standards. These documents served multiple purposes: legal protection for the United States against potential treaty violation allegations, information for Japanese authorities receiving repatriates, and historical record of POW operations. The psychological preparation for repatriation received less systematic attention. While military authorities recognized that prisoners faced significant readjustment challenges, limited resources and cultural barriers constrained counseling efforts. Available documentation suggests that prisoner concerns centered on family welfare, economic survival prospects in devastated Japan, and social stigma associated with captivity status. Transport arrangements utilized military shipping, returning to Pacific theaters after delivering occupation forces. Liberty ships and troop transports converted to repatriation duty carried prisoners from West Coast embarkation ports to reception centers in Japan. The journey typically required 2 to 3 weeks, with prisoners housed in cargo holds retrofitted with temporary bunks. Conditions during transport reflected reduced standards compared to facility living. Space constraints limited movement, and seasickness affected many prisoners unaccustomed to extended sea voyages. Rations remained adequate, but less varied than facility meals. Medical personnel accompanied transports to address health emergencies, with several documented cases requiring shipboard treatment. Arrival in Japan confronted repatriates with destruction far exceeding their expectations. Major ports like Yokohama and Kobe showed extensive bombing damage. Reception facilities struggled to process returning personnel efficiently amid occupation chaos and administrative breakdown. American military government authorities coordinated with Japanese officials to establish processing centers, but capabilities remained limited. The social reception awaiting repatriates proved complex and often hostile. Japanese society's shame culture created stigma around surrender, and returning POWs faced suspicion and discrimination. Some communities welcomed family members home, but others ostracized former prisoners. Employment prospects diminished significantly for men marked as having surrendered, regardless of circumstances. Personal accounts preserved in Japanese Veterans Associations archives document repatriation experiences. Many repatriates described profound dislocation, finding themselves unable to reconcile memories of American treatment with renewed exposure to Japanese propaganda characterizing Americans as barbaric. The cognitive dissonance created lasting psychological effects that some repatriates carried for decades. The material conditions of post-war Japan shocked repatriates accustomed to American abundance. Food rationing continued through late 1940s, with average daily caloric intake far below Camp McCoy levels. Housing shortages forced many repatriates into temporary accommodations or extended family situations. Economic devastation limited employment opportunities, particularly for men whose war service had interrupted education or career development. Government support for repatriates remained minimal. Japanese authorities, overwhelmed by economic collapse and occupation demands, provided limited assistance to returning POWs. Demobilization payments barely covered immediate survival needs. Veterans' benefits emerged slowly over subsequent years as economic recovery progressed. The contrast between captivity conditions and post-war Japanese reality created a perverse irony that some repatriates acknowledged privately. They had lived better as American prisoners than as free citizens in defeated Japan. This recognition carried profound shame and confusion, challenging fundamental assumptions about national identity, enemy characterization, and the meaning of wartime sacrifice. The historical significance of Japanese POW treatment at American facilities like Camp McCoy extends beyond immediate wartime circumstances, influencing post-war reconciliation, international law development, and scholarly understanding of conflict dynamics. Decades of declassified documentation and historical research have enabled comprehensive assessment of this chapter of World War II history. Comparative analysis of POW treatment across combatant nations reveals stark contrasts. While American facilities generally adhered to Geneva Convention standards, Japanese treatment of Allied POWs demonstrated systematic violations. Mortality rates among Allied prisoners in Japanese custody reached approximately 27%, compared to less than 4% for Axis prisoners in American custody. These statistics, drawn from official records compiled by governments and international organizations, underscore fundamental differences in prisoner treatment philosophies. The approximately 5,400 Japanese POWs held in American facilities represented a tiny fraction of overall Japanese military forces. Japan's military culture so strongly discouraged surrender that prisoner numbers remained minimal throughout most of the Pacific War. This changed somewhat during final campaigns as battlefield circumstances left some units with no alternatives, but the ideological resistance to capture persisted. Camp McCoy itself transitioned through various military functions following the war. The facility continued operating as a training base, eventually becoming Fort McCoy, which remains an active Army installation. The prisoner compounds were demolished or repurposed, with few physical remnants preserved. Historical markers and museum exhibits now document the facility's POW history, part of broader efforts to record wartime homefront experiences. Academic scholarship examining POW treatment has evolved significantly since 1945. Early historical accounts focused primarily on operational and strategic dimensions. Subsequent research incorporated psychological, cultural, and sociological perspectives, analyzing how captivity experiences shaped individual and national identities. Recent scholarship emphasizes transnational approaches, examining POW experiences as windows into broader cultural values and military practices. The memoirs and oral histories of former POWs provide invaluable first-hand perspectives. Several Japanese veterans who experienced captivity at American facilities published accounts in subsequent decades, though cultural factors limited such publications. Shame associated with surrender meant many former POWs remained silent about experiences, carrying memories privately rather than sharing publicly. Some accounts that did emerge revealed complex assessments. Former prisoners acknowledged that American treatment contradicted indoctrinated expectations of enemy barbarism. Several memoirists noted that captivity experiences fundamentally altered their worldviews, though they expressed this recognition carefully given social stigma. The contrast between propaganda and reality created cognitive dissonance that some struggled to reconcile even decades later. The role of American abundance in prisoner psychology merits particular attention. Material prosperity so exceeded Japanese expectations that it challenged fundamental assumptions about enemy vulnerability. Prisoners observed that American forces possessed resources to feed enemies generously while simultaneously conducting massive military campaigns on multiple fronts. This demonstration of material capacity contradicted Japanese propaganda, characterizing America as decadent and resource-starved. Geneva Convention compliance served American strategic interests beyond humanitarian considerations. Demonstrating adherence to international law supported American claims to moral authority in conducting war. It also established precedent for post-war international legal frameworks, including the subsequent Geneva Conventions of 1949 that expanded protections based partly on World War II experiences. The reciprocity principle underlying Geneva Convention philosophy proved tragically ineffective regarding Japan. Despite American adherence to treaty obligations, Japanese forces systematically violated protections for captured American and Allied personnel. The reasons for this disparity reflected fundamentally different military cultures. American forces operated within Western legal traditions, emphasizing individual rights, while Japanese military culture subordinated individual existence to collective national purposes. The long-term impact on U.S.-Japan relations remains subject to historical debate. Some scholars argue that humane POW treatment contributed marginally to post-war reconciliation by providing counter-narratives to wartime propaganda. Others contend that the small numbers of Japanese POWs and their social marginalization limited broader impact. The occupation period is extensive. American presence influenced post-war relations far more significantly than wartime captivity experiences of limited prisoner populations. Contemporary relevance emerges in ongoing debates about prisoner treatment, international humanitarian law, and cultural factors in conflict. The Camp McCoy story provides historical case study of how military forces can maintain professional standards even amid total war's extreme circumstances. It demonstrates that adherence to legal and ethical frameworks remains possible when institutional structures prioritize compliance. Museums and historical sites preserving POW history include the Wisconsin Veterans Museum in Madison, which maintains exhibits on Camp McCoy's wartime role. The National Archives holds extensive documentation of POW operations, including camp records, intelligence reports, and administrative correspondence. These resources enable continued historical research and public education about this dimension of World War II homefront experience. The human dimension of the story transcends statistics and policy analysis. Individual prisoners experienced profound psychological journeys from indoctrinated soldiers, expecting death to captives, confronting unexpected humanity from designated enemies. American guards and camp personnel navigated complex duties, balancing security requirements with humanitarian obligations. These human elements resist simple characterization, revealing instead the complicated realities of war's impact on individuals, thrust into extraordinary circumstances. The legacy of facilities like Camp McCoy ultimately resides in demonstrating that even in history's most destructive conflicts, legal frameworks and institutional commitments to humanitarian principles can produce outcomes that honor human dignity. The contrast between American and Japanese POW treatment exemplifies how national values and military cultures shape wartime conduct in fundamental ways. This historical record continues informing contemporary discussions about the laws of war, treatment of captured combatants, and the possibility of maintaining ethical standards amid conflict's chaos. For viewers interested in evidence-based World War II history that examines lesser-known dimensions of the conflict, this channel provides detailed analysis based on primary source documentation. The human stories behind military operations, strategic decisions, and wartime policies reveal the complex realities that shaped history's most consequential conflict. Subscribe for more content exploring these forgotten chapters of World War II.